that spray paint on the kids' heads?
Sherwin-Williams spray paint. Fine bars. Yeah, they did a little promotion at the Q for one of the hockey games we went to recently. You watch it out.
Oh.
Not real spray paint.
Returning to the hierarchical nav, I understood your point. Do you think that applies to more like web applications? We're starting a new system. We look at our competitor system, and what we find is I have no idea where I'm at in their system at any time. Like I somehow got to some page or some element, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? You know what I mean? So like, we've been sort of addressing that by a more hierarchical nav that always shows you this is where you're at in the system. You know what I mean?
Okay, so I'm not arguing against hierarchy. Yeah. What I'm saying is that the overuse of hierarchy by saying that something can only be in one place is where you tend to run into an issue. When somebody sees something exists in two places, they're like, whoa, 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 how can you do that? You can't do that. I think that actually is very effective, especially for people navigating your app or your website, because if you go to a store and you go to a department in that store and you go to an aisle in that store, you know where you've come from. I mean, you're physically walking through the store, but when you're on a website, it's like it's like Star Trek. We're beaming around. You're just suddenly appear somewhere. So you need to have guideposts and indications of where you're at. So I think that actually works really well when it makes sense. And that doesn't mean that hierarchically it doesn't fit in one category, but also hierarchically it might fit somewhere else too.
Okay.
Yes, sir. You mentioned that the infinite scroll is a bad thing. Can you expand a little bit more on that? Because we see a lot of success in sites like Facebook and Stack Exchange where they have like the lazy load. Are you speaking more about sites that you're trying to reach specific data?
Yeah, I think that what I've seen is that when you have like a list of like search results on your website, having it just continue to go on and on can work against you if you're trying to get somebody to kind of click through to something. They feel like they want to reach the end of it. Is this everything? Because maybe I need to refine my search. Things like that. You don't want to get people introduced into an area where they just kind of feel like they just kind of need to keep going. And I think that, if you look at like Google's image search, like they went to like what Bing was doing, like, oh, it just keeps loading images, that's great. And both of them now kind of like, they load for a while, but eventually you reach okay, you're done and start back over so that they get you to refine your search. So that's where I see that working. I'm not saying you shouldn't never do it. I mean, obviously, Pinterest is very successful in doing this. People to waste hours of their time. So, yeah.
So with the hierarchy
information,
what do you? Can I get your thoughts on how like the New York Times and Time.com have switched to this style? All their articles, regardless of arguable importance, now fit into this one theme almost, where all the article titles are large. You have these big full width images and those types of things. Doesn't that kind of take away the visual cues from a reader's perspective of whether an article is worth their time or not?
That's a good question. I think they've probably done some research to see how their readers are interacting with their content. And so, like anything, I think the idea of UX mythology is to look at anything that you're doing and say, does this make sense? Is it really working? Because if it's not, then maybe we should change what we're doing. Maybe they did that there. I would argue that, at the end of the day, if you have a preference for something in terms of your news, and you're going there and you're getting what you need, and they're seeing that people are reading these articles, that they might be doing it because of that. But just on its own, without any frame of reference, I would say that you're probably right, that if there's a visual indicator as to where to go, what's important, what news is international versus related to entertainment or something else, that you're not going to get that. But maybe that's what happens when you self-select and you say, okay, well, here's sort of like all the news aggregated together, and I want to know about sports, and you flip through, and then you're seeing stuff related to that. So, I just got one back here, and then okay, done. Okay.
Have you done any analytics on header or margin menus?
Could you be more specific, header or margin menus?
Yeah, like you have like a header menu that's at the top, and it has like site navigation.
Global nav versus main nav. A little bit, yeah. We actually, we've moved to doing that more often with our designs in order to give people things that, in the context of what they're trying to do, is there when they need it. So in some cases, I've worked with clients that, that they have, their visitors need to log in, and so we'll put that right there in the header, globally. In some cases, in one case actually, we did it so it was just on the homepage. Because internally, you didn't really need it. People were almost exclusively going there from the homepage. We saw that trend in the analytics, and so we made sure it was easy for them to log in. In fact, we actually pulled it out of the header to put it right into the content. But I think it also helps break things up. So if you talk about, your company, how to get in touch, how to log in, those things tend to work more in that utility navigation that is higher up. We see that, people, they'll say, well, you don't put this in the footer because people aren't going to see it. Yet there's certain kinds of content, whether it's, like about us, location, information, legal stuff, but that they expect to see that kind of stuff in the footer, and that's where, those pages tend to have the most entry paths through things like the footer, and the same thing with the header. When we look at the analytics for websites where we've got, a main navigation that's got 8 or 9 items in it, it starts to perform pretty badly because people are going through and everything kind of seems like it's the same importance, and we're about the company. And here's the thing that I talk about: user-centered design or designing for the user means you shouldn't really be talking about yourself too much. That stuff should be there, but you should really be talking about what it is that you do, because that's what they're interested in, and that's what the main navigation is really good for. Whereas the utility nav is a little bit more for, okay, if you want to know more about us, or if you want to get in contact with us, this is here, and it's it's no frills, it's available in all the pages.
Yeah, can you give us your thoughts on homepage sliders?
I'm not a big fan. That said, I mean, I've done the slider. I think it's symptomatic of page bull, and that people want to get their content up and they think, oh, we'll just create a big carousel and we'll put everything in the carousel. You get 12 little dots at the bottom of your screen. I don't think it's all that effective. What we've seen in actually looking at analytics is that the only ones that are effective tend to be mostly the first, like more than 80% of any kind of interaction, if you've got a call to action or anything like that, will happen in the very first slider item, carousel item, with it dropping down to like less than 20% in the second. Past that, what's the point? So then I can argue, well, then why do you even have it? Now it's just window dressing. Design without content, without compelling content is decoration. Jeffrey Tillman said that, not me, but.
So I don't know if this was just me or if maybe you saw this too, but
no, we want to go back to slide one.
website, it seemed like a lot of the, like I was reading through some of the courses, and it seemed like the content was very, crunched and not very.
That's what I'm saying. You can put that screen here.
Like I actually went in and inspected, increased line height, stuff like that, and compared to font size, I don't know if you saw that or I was just being weird about it.
Well, no, I mean, I think that looking at line height and paragraph size, spacing, all of that, this is why when you use like a program like Pages or Word, that stuff's built in. I see a lot of people that will, they still use Word and they do the double enter to put space between paragraphs. That should be built right into the styling. And so I think that if you look at sites that are, like Square does a good job of this, if you read their content, it's easy to read. They're picking a good web safe font, something that renders well on the screen, renders well, retina displays, things like that. And again, if you're trying to get people to engage with your content and understand what you're saying, if you crunch everything together, as I said in the white space part, it's going to have less of an impact on being something that people would want to consume and understand versus just skim over and maybe not read and understand as well. I think there's a question back there. That's a good question. The question was about how is HTML5 video impacting web design, and I can tell you from my own experience that starting back in the day, the only way to deliver video was through Flash. Nowadays, that's not quite so much of a problem. I think that video is a very effective way of getting information out to your users that shows them, in the context of something, what it is that your product or service does, and it can make it mobile friendly. So you have to go with HTML5 video if you're trying to reach a wider audience. I think that the thing that you want to think about there is how you're delivering that content across multiple platforms for things like responsive design. So if you've got high resolution video, that's great if somebody's connected and they've got a wide screen there on a laptop or something like that. But if they're on a mobile device, you're going to want to try to use media queries to serve up that content at a lower res and giving alternate versions of the video served through it. It's nice too because through technologies like Amazon's EC2, you can put HTML5 video up there and have them have expire headers so that you're not having people just like grab your content right off the site if you don't want them to. So you still get that benefit that Flash kind of gave you where it's like, here's the video, it's our proprietary stuff or whatever. And then, just don't overdo it. I think that sometimes I see in designs, people are they just want to make their home page a video. It's almost like going back to let's just have a Flash website. That's not going to be all that effective. Any other questions here? All right.
So, what do you think is the most effective way to communicate with a client or a stakeholder about the myth of the bold or an effective use of white space? You find that it's difficult?
Unfortunately, I do, and it's what inspired this because it still comes up. At the end of the day, unfortunately, even after all those arguments, sometimes they're like, yeah, I just don't care. I just want it to be this certain way. And in some ways you might need to bend on that, but I would say at least fight the good fight. So, the things that I have in this talk, which I'll put the slides up on the GitHub repo, and you can pull that down for reference and whatnot, is to just say to people, okay, if you've got content and it makes sense to tell a story with it, it's going to be more effective. And pointing them in the direction of here's where people are doing a really good job, I think helps. We've gotten to the point now where we don't just present designs. I don't even present wireframes out of context without showing them other examples of where this is done well, so that they can see now when you get to your design or your IA, it's going to have some of these elements in them, so they're not maybe quite so. Oh, what do you mean it doesn't fit within this little square? So that can be helpful. Right. So the question is about having the most important information above the page fold, and how does that work when you're trying to convey a lot of stuff, and that's really what you need to hook them, right? Well, I think think about what you said. If the most important information needs to go above the fold, who would argue against that? The problem is that people have a hard time kind of they want to bring everything with them. They're like my kids. They're like, I want to bring this toy, this other toy. I got 50 toys that are my favorite toy. You got to have some. Say if you pick one or two, and what's the most important to you? So that takes work. It doesn't seem like it. It seems like that would be the easy part, but it's not. It's hard to get concise, to come up with a concise brand statement that gets them in there. I would also argue that if you're doing a good job, people are going to want to scroll because they're going to see that and they go, I want to know more. I want to know more, and that's going to get you down the page. I think that when you get stuck is when there's too much there, you're not really sure what to look at next. Should I click on the carousel and go to the next thing? There first. So I think that tends to work better for you. All right. Matthew Ball. Is Matthew Ball here? Matthew Ball. All right, come on down. You get to pick here. These. What you got one here? Is Kyle Dreger here? Kyle Dreger? Oh, here he is. All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I'll be here all day, so stop me in the hall and see you.